With West Ham United set to face Championship side Bristol City in the third round of the FA Cup on Sunday, all eyes are going to be on what type of team David Moyes will be selecting for the game, and whether any of our academy players might get a look in, either as a start or on the bench. But with three players due back from injury and illnesses, we could see a lineup along the lines of something like this. We're aware that Fabianski is our cup goalkeeper. Vladimir Sufal is back from illness, may have gotten over his shock from the recent contract he wasn't happy with. Mavropanos and Dogbona, I think, will line up again at the back with Kurt Zouma missing yet again and Nayef Aguerd on AFCON duty, and of course Emerson on the left. Midfield will look quite familiar with Alvarez in the pivot. With Jared Bowen, I believe, will be moving out on the left with with Souček, Ward-Prowse, and of course Paquetá being back from injury as well. And we're expecting Michail Antonio to also start in this game. If he doesn't start, then quite possibly he'll be on the bench and be brought on. And then I think maybe Fornals might get the nod over Benrahma, who hasn't had the best of times in the last few games recently. But I'm not really here to talk about the game. I think we're going to have enough if all those players are picked. One, it means that I doubt very much we'll see any youngsters. We might see one or two on the bench to fill the numbers, but I doubt very much we'll get to see any of them get game time. But I guess that all depends, of course, on how well we're doing. If we're winning handsomely, then maybe David Moyes might give one or two of the young players a nod. But that's not really what this video is about today. It's more about the transfers and more specifically about our defence and transfer window, looking at our defence. Now, we already know that our transfer window has kind of started in earnest. Thilo Kehrer has now completed his switch to Monaco, and he cited that what he wanted was regular footballing time so that he could win his place back in the German national team with European football coming up imminently next summer. He wants to be part of that and not be left behind. He has lost his place in recent times in the German national team. With a £430,000 loan move, which could become permanent in the summer, it looks like his playing days for West Ham United are certainly up. There's an agreement that if he plays a certain number of games, the move will become permanent. And there's a £9.5 million deal on the table, which would mean that with the 400,000 as a loan deal, we'd get our money back on Kehrer. So I guess, given that we've had 18 months of service out of him and getting our money back for the player, is kind of not a bad thing. But we do seem to have issues with our defence year in, year out, don't we? I mean, we have issues with strikers, but we know about that because David Moyes can never really find a striker that suits the style of football that he plays or that he commands his team to play. But when it comes to defenders, given that David Moyes is, by trade, was a defender himself, it's quite kind of ironic, kind of weird that we can't seem to get a stable set of central defenders for the club. We seem to be changing defenders every season. Of course, we had Frederick Alves. I don't know if you want to count him. It was a rather odd purchase, to say the least. Craig Dawson, of course, we all thought was going to be a failure, but turned out to be an absolute sensation. But he wanted to move because he wanted to go back up north. Fabien Balbuena just wasn't fancied by Moyes and ended up leaving. And I'm not sure why. I thought he was quite a good player. Izzy Diop found it hard under David Moyes and ended up demanding a move from the club. And now we've had, of course, Thilo Kehrer, who many are saying, there's stories out there that are saying that David Moyes didn't really fancy the player. He never really wanted to buy him in the first place. But look, I think the move for him could turn out to be best for the player himself and for West Ham United. So we're kind of left with a few centre backs that still have not so great, is it? Because we've got Kurt Zuma and we've got Nayef Aguerd. Now, Moyes brought both of these players in, and we know Kurt Zuma, yet again, is suffering from injuries. And we're hearing rumours now that Nayef Aguerd doesn't actually want to be at West Ham United. Of course, we've got Dinos Mavropanos in, which was brought in by Tim Steiden, recommended by Tim Steiden. And of course, the evergreen Angelo Ogbonna, who has done exceptionally well over the time that he's been called upon. But we've still got problems. Out of those four centre backs, we've got Zuma with his injuries, and we seem to have a Gerd who doesn't want to be here. Now, Ogbonna has been absolutely superb, but at 35 years of age, how much longer are we going to be able to rely on him? I mean, look, he's come in, he's done an excellent job. He's a model professional, doesn't complain when he doesn't get game time. But at 35, potentially looking like he's going to be offered another year extension on his contract. Is this the right path for West Ham United? Yeah, we seem to be extending contracts for all our aged players like Fabianski, Antonio, now potentially Ogbonna, etc. Yeah, but there comes a time when you have to start looking at some new blood. Now, we all know that Kurt Zuma's knee injuries have always been a problem, or his injuries per se have always been an issue. From the day that we targeted him, that day that David Moyes wanted to bring him to West Ham United, we knew about his injuries. I remember doing shows talking about the injuries that he had and the number of games that he missed. And it's a surprise, to be quite honest with you, that he manages to play any games with the injuries that he's had over the years. Just over in the number of games that have been available to Kurt Zouma since he moved to West Ham United, he's missed on average one in every four. There's been about 124 games that he's been available for, or that we've played since he's been around in both Premier League and in Europe. I'm not counting the domestic cups. And of those, he's missed 30 in total. Like I said, that's one in every something like four. If you just count the league games alone, that's about 93 league games that have been available for him to play in the seasons that he's been here. And he's missed 23 of those. And that's one in every three and a half games. So we know that he's had problems. We've known it all along. And there was another player that David Moyes was looking at the time. And you just wonder whether David Moyes made the right choice when he went for Zuma. We understand Moyes wants players with Premier League experience. At that time, it seemed like the right thing to do. It seemed like the right sort of player to get. But what did we pay for him? Something like £28 million. It kind of feels now, 2.5 years down the line, that perhaps it wasn't necessarily the right move for David Moyes to have made. Because if you remember, we were also interested in this player, Milenkovic, from Fiorentina. Now, Milenkovic, he's 26 years of age, he's a couple of years younger than Kurt Zouma, 3 years younger. In the time that he's been at Fiorentina, forget about just in the last couple of years, but in the last 6 years, he's missed 14 games in total. And the worst of that was missing something like 6 games for abductor pains. So at the time of buying Zuma, he was 28 million pounds. Nikola Milenkovic was available for only 16 million pounds if we could have done the deal. So there's that. Zuma, we know it doesn't last the season. He's again out injured. We're not expecting him to be back anytime soon. We don't know how long he's going to be out for. So there must be a cry out for in this transfer window to try and bolster our central defence, especially now that Kerr has gone as well, and with Nayef Aguerd being out on duty at the AFCON. Now, on Wednesday, when I did the West Ham Weekly, I suggested that Nayef Aguerd All these rumours about him sort of maybe wanted to leave West Ham United were probably down to his agent. And apparently, I was told then that his agent was playing funny but silly games, etc., and has been trying to get the player to be moved out of West Ham since last summer. Now it seems that the player himself seems to not want to be at West Ham United, given what I've been told over the last few days. Um, Apparently, this illness that Aguerd had just before he went to the AFCON seemed to go on a bit longer than some of the other players that had the bug. There's no denying there was a bug going round. Even now, sort of Soufal has had it and several other players have had it. But Aguerd's illness seemed to last a bit longer. And there's a suggestion now that he found reasons not to play for West Ham until he managed to get to the AFCON. Now, does that mean that Aguerd is not going to play for West Ham United anymore? Well, Billy McKinlay, who did the the press conference for the game against Bristol City, was asked about Aguerd, and this is some of the things that he said. He said, "I'm not privy to the speculation on Aguerd. We're happy with the players that we have. He's been a really important player for us. He's been a really important player for us. Not he is a really important player for us. And I wouldn't want to speculate too much on anything other than that." Now, whilst managers and coaches during press conferences, sort of try and do it diligently and try not to give too much away, it would have been far easier for McKinlay to just have denied, any rumours about Aguerd. Could have just said, well, they're not true, let's move on. But he kind of didn't deny them. But again, he didn't really corroborate them either. So that's kind of left the door open, hasn't it, as to what's going to happen with Aguerd moving forward. Look, it's a bit confusing for me because Aguerd would have known that David Moyes was chasing him for like 2 seasons before we actually bought him. I remember doing a show at least 3 years ago where I talked about Nayef Aguerd being a target for West Ham United under David Moyes. And that means Aguerd would have been aware of Moyes. He would have been aware of West Ham. He would have been aware of David Moyes, how he plays football, how he sets his teams up, etc. And that's why it confuses. He's a regular starter for the team. He's always been trusted. He's always been thrown in there. Moyes has put a lot of faith in him. He believes in the player. So it kind of confuses me what it is about Aguerd that makes him want to leave. Now, many Moyes outers will say it's because of the way we play. What defender would want to sort of defend for 90% of the game, and be put under so much pressure? But that's his job. He's there to defend. He is a defender, so you do it to the best of your ability. And, he hasn't had the best of times. I mean, he's been a little bit, on and off Aguerd this season. Sometimes he'll pull off a decent game, and other times, he looks a bit out of sorts. And maybe the fact that he doesn't want to be there is having a toll on the way he's playing. Look, if we're going to let him go, he's going to come at a price. West Ham have no intention of losing a penny on the player, and we will demand £30 million or maybe even more to let the player leave. Now, there's been interest about him from several Italian clubs about going out on loan, but West Ham United are not remotely interested in sending him out on loan. If he wants to go, then someone's going to have to pay the right price for him, but also we're going to have a potential replacement for the player. Now, we hear quite a bit about various players that we've rumoured to be interested in. And one of them is, of course, Jonathan Tah, the 27-year-old Bayer Leverkusen centre-back. He's been linked to West Ham United again for the last couple of years or so. Very decent centre-back. He's managed to work his way back into the German national team. And ironically, he's played not only centre-back, but at right-back. Guess at whose expense? Yeah. He's been selected over Thilo Kehrer. Look, there's no denying that Jonathan Tah is a decent player, but he's also had his fair share of injuries throughout his career. But having said that, the last game he missed was back in the 21-22 season where he had an infection that just kept him out for one game. And then before that, prior to that, he did have a series of injuries, but it looks like the worst is over. He's stabilised. He's playing regular football by Leverkusen. He captains that team, and as I've said, he's back in the German national team as well. Now, of course, with Tim Steidten being at West Ham United, the links have resurfaced again. But like I said, we've been interested in Jonathan Tah for quite some time. But I guess because of Steidten, the links are back stronger. He's a £20 million rated centre back with a year and a half left on his Bayer Leverkusen contract. So maybe, yes, the club might be looking to potentially cash in on him. But that doesn't relate to the homegrown talent that we sort of seem to need. And one of the things that we have to do over the next couple of transfer windows is to not only be looking for players to come in and replace or enhance the squad, etc., but we also have to look at homegrown. Now, in a 25-man squad, West Ham can have, or every Premier League team can have up to 17 overseas players, meaning that 8 of those 25 players have to be homegrown. Now, you can lose homegrown players, but that means you can't replace them with an overseas player. So, for example, if we have only 7 homegrown players left in the squad, that means we can only have a squad of 24. If we have only 6, then a squad of 23, and so on. Now, with Tilo Kehrer having left, our squad size is actually 23. 24 if you include Divin Mubama, but you don't have to because he's under 21. So we've got 23 places in the squad. We've got 2 available. But the players that we have as homegrown include Joseph Anang, Aaron Creswell, Ben Johnson, Connor Coventry, James Ward-Prowse, Jared Bowen, Danny Ings, Mikel Antonio. There are 8 homegrowns. And then Divin Mubama, who isn't included because he's under 21. So when it comes to it, throughout this transfer window, there's a potential that we could lose 3 homegrown players. There are many rumours floating around that these 3 players, Ben Johnson, Danny Ings, and Connor Coventry, could be moved on this January. If that's the case, then we're going to have to look for 3 homegrown players to replace them in order to maintain a 25-man squad. Now, that's going to be quite difficult, but there are some homegrown players that we are linked to. And the first, of course, the rumours coming out over the last few days has been, of course, Max Kilman. Shame on me on Wednesday when I did the West Ham Weekly that people were talking about Kilman in the chat, and I was trying to rattle my brain. Kilman. I couldn't remember who he played for. Of course, he's the Wolves centre back and captain of the team. Now, why would Wolves want to depart with Max Kilman? Well, simply because the money that they think they could get will help them improve the squad. They could probably get maybe 2 players. He's being rumoured to be rated at around £40 million, valued at around £40 million. Wolves will probably think that they can get maybe 2 players to come in with that money. Now, why don't we just go out and buy 2 players instead of Wolves and instead of paying 40 million for 1 player? Well, if you kind of think about what's being said, the statements that are coming out of West Ham United are, we want to improve, want to continue improving, want to continue getting better players into the squad. And by doing that, then of course you've got to pay a lot of money. And especially with homegrown players, English players, they're always going to be a little bit more costly than getting an overseas player. So I'm not saying that you can't get 2 decent players at £20 million each. Of course, Jared Bowen was only 19 million when we bought him. But I think what West Ham United are aiming to do is if they want to continue enhancing the squad and continue improving it, then players like Kilman, who are rated at around £40 million, are the sort of players that I guess we're going to have to be looking at. Look at what we did in the transfer window in the summer. Kudus for 35, 36 million pounds. Last summer, before that, we got Paquetá in for a sizable fee, and so on and so forth. Furthermore, the good thing about Kilman is he's left-footed, which could be an ideal replacement for Nayef Aguerd. and very possibly a future partner for Dinos Mavropanos, who is proving to be a very good signing after taking quite a bit of time of breaking into the team. Because, like I said earlier, we can't rely on Kurt Zuma's fitness, nor can we rely on Angelo Ogbonna's longevity. And this still would look to be the most obvious choice right now to get Kilman in at West Ham United. It kind of makes sense. But despite the price, would Wolves sell? Well, I guess there's only one way to find out, and that's to actually make a bid. If it looks like Aguerd stays unnumbered at West Ham United, we make a bid. And if it looks like Wolves are ready to sell, then that bodes well for us. But I think Kilman, to be really, really honest, is likely to be much more of a summer target rather than this January windows target. He's still got 4.5 years remaining on his contract. Wolves will not necessarily be in that much of a hurry to sell. But like I said, of course, they want to improve their squad. So maybe they do have to sell one of their prized assets to do that. Another homegrown player who's been mentioned over the last day or two is Chelsea's Trevor Chalobah, who Maurizio Pochettino has stated is no longer in his plans. But there's a big catch, a massive catch to this, because Chalobah hasn't kicked a ball all season due to a thigh injury, and he's still on the road to recovery. So the chances of Chelsea being able to, Chelsea want to offload him. He's got another 4 years left on his contract as well. But the chances of Chelsea offloading him, even if there's a suggestion that could be for nothing in order to get them off, get the player off their books. You know, they got FFP problems coming up as well. I don't know. They seem quite remote. Even if they do allow Chalobah to sort of sign somewhere on loan, which is the suggestion for the rest of this season, with a potential prospect of that loan signing to become a permanent signing in the summer. But with the player still recovering from injury, that does seem a little bit far-fetched. Another homegrown talent is, of course, Nottingham Forest's Joe Worrell, who, again, we've been linked to in the past. Now, just like Chelsea, Nottingham Forest have got FFP problems, and they also need to sell players in order to meet FFP rules. Now, the thing with Worrell is he's been in and out of the Nottingham Forest team this season. He hasn't necessarily been a regular. He started the season as captain of the team in the first 5 games, where Forest won 2, lost 2, and drew 1, and then he was dropped to the bench. And he's only made 2 sub appearances since then. And there's been a number of games he wasn't even in the squad itself. So when you consider the options that we've got, if we're really targeting homegrown players, and if it isn't Kilman, then you have to say we may not strengthen in defence till the summer. And that could mean, whether he likes it or not, the one player that may have to stay at West Ham United until the summer is Nayef Aguerd.